Welcome to MindVorn. We rarely stop to ask ourselves a terrifying question, not because the answer is complicated, but because it is uncomfortable. What if the person you believe you are is only a surface version? What if beneath your thoughts, beneath your logic, there exists another presence, watching quietly, deciding silently, waiting patiently? You wake up every day believing you are in control, that your choices are conscious, that your reactions are logical, that your life is something you actively steer. But control is not always loud, real. Power rarely announces itself. Sometimes it hides the illusion of choice. Think about the last decision you made today. It felt simple, didn't it? Natural, automatic. But ask yourself this: why did that option feel right? Why did the other one feel wrong? Without you fully knowing why. Your mind gave you a feeling first, and then your logic followed. We like to believe logic leads. In reality, logic often justifies decisions already made somewhere deeper. This is where the illusion begins. Because the mind does not wait for permission. It acts, then explains. A quiet force beneath awareness deep inside you. There's a system that never sleeps. It does not rest. It does not question morality. It does not care about your comfort. It exists for one purpose only: to keep you functioning. This system learned who you are long before you ever tried to understand yourself. It learned from pain. From fear. From repetition. From moments you barely remember. And now it runs quietly in the background, like an operating system you never installed consciously. Yet everything depends on it. Why you react before you think. Have you noticed how fast emotions appear? Anger. Fear. Attraction. Discomfort. They arrive instantly. Before thought, before reasoning. That speed is not an accident. Your subconscious was designed to react faster than logic. Because in the past, speed meant survival. But survival mechanisms don't disappear just because the world becomes safer. They evolve, and sometimes they become outdated. Yet they still control you. The mind remembers what you forgot. You forget events, but your body remembers sensations. You forget words, but your mind remembers emotions. A tone of voice can trigger anxiety without you knowing why. A certain silence can feel threatening even when nothing is wrong. A pattern, a look, a familiar energy. Your mind connects dots you are not aware of seeing, and then it reacts. You call it intuition, instinct, a gut feeling, but it is memory, operating in the dark. Why this is uncomfortable to accept. The idea that you are not fully in control creates resistance. Your ego doesn't like it. Your identity feels threatened. Because if your choices are influenced, then your self-image is fragile. And the mind protects its image fiercely. That is why most people never go deeper. They stay at the surface. They stay comfortable. They say, "This is just how I am." But that sentence is often a lie learned early. The beginning of awareness does not feel empowering at first. It feels destabilizing. Because when you start observing your thoughts, you realize something unsettling. Thoughts appear on their own. You didn't invite them. You didn't choose them. They just show up. And yet, you believe they are you. A subtle question for you right now. As you listen to this, who is listening? The thoughts reacting to these words, or the awareness watching those thoughts? That difference matters more than you think. Pause, let silence breathe. Most people never notice this gap. They live inside automatic reactions, inside habits they never consciously chose. They confuse familiarity with truth, repetition with identity. And slowly, the hidden system tightens its grip, not violently, not aggressively, quietly. Why the mind prefers control over happiness, why it repeats pain even when it hurts, and why breaking free feels terrifying, even when it's exactly what you need. Because once you see how deep this goes, you can't unsee it. Most people don't realize when control slips away, there is no dramatic moment, no clear warning. It happens quietly. Over years. Small reactions become habits. Habits become identity. And identity becomes a prison that feels familiar enough to feel safe. This is how the mind prefers it. Because familiarity feels like protection, even when it hurts. Why the mind chooses pain over change. Here is something rarely discussed. Your mind does not chase happiness. It chases predictability, pain. That is familiar feels safer than uncertainty that might heal you. That is why people return to toxic relationships. Why? They repeat self-sabotaging patterns. Why they stay stuck in lives they secretly hate, not because they enjoy suffering, but because their subconscious recognizes it, and recognition feels like control. You may consciously say, "I want change," but deep inside, another voice whispers, "At least this pain is known." That voice is old. It was formed when survival mattered more than fulfillment, and it still speaks. The comfort of the known cage. Imagine a cage you've lived in your whole life. You know its corners. You know its limits. You know exactly how much it hurts. Now imagine the door opens. Freedom stands outside. But so does uncertainty. Your mind hesitates, not because freedom is dangerous, but because it is unfamiliar, and the subconscious does not trust the unfamiliar. So it pulls you back. Gently, quietly, and you call it fear, or doubt, or being realistic, but it is simply conditioning. How early experiences rewrite you the most powerful. Programming happens early, before logic develops, before language fully forms. Moments of embarrassment, moments of rejection, moments where silence felt heavy. Your mind recorded them all, not as memories, but as rules. Rules like, don't speak too much, don't trust easily, love leads to pain, being invisible is safer. You don't remember learning these rules, but you live by them. Every day. And the most dangerous part, you believe these rules are you. You call them personality. You defend them. You build your life around them. Without ever questioning who wrote them. Automatic reactions, the mind on autopilot. Watch how fast you react to criticism. How quickly you pull away from vulnerability. How instinctively you protect your ego. That speed is not choice. It is automation. Your subconscious reacts first. Your conscious mind arrives later to explain. An explanation feels like control, but explanation is often just storytelling after the fact. The voice that isn't yours. Listen carefully to your inner dialogue. The tone, the judgments, the assumptions. Ask yourself something uncomfortable. Would you speak to another human the way your mind speaks to you? That critical voice, the one that doubts, warns, limits. It did not originate with you. It was learned. And now, it runs freely. Awareness feels like losing ground when people begin to notice this. They feel disoriented. Detached. Uncertain. Because awareness removes certainty, and certainty is comforting. But comfort is not growth, and safety is not freedom. Awareness is the moment you realize the steering wheel has been turning itself. For a moment of stillness right now. Pause. Notice the thought reacting to these words. Notice the urge to agree or resist. That noticing, that space, that is not thought. That is awareness. And awareness is not controlled by the subconscious. That is why it feels powerful and fragile. We'll explore why awareness alone is not enough. Why the mind fights back when observed. And why true control feels unsettling at first. Because once you start watching the watcher, everything begins to shift. When the mind resists being seen, here's something most people are never warned about. The moment you start observing your mind, it reacts, not calmly. Not gently. It resists, because observation threatens control. The subconscious was designed to operate in darkness. It prefers anonymity. It prefers to run silently, without interference. So when awareness turns toward it, it doesn't disappear. It fights back. You may notice restlessness. Sudden boredom, a strong urge to distract yourself. Your phone feels more interesting. Your thoughts feel louder. Your attention becomes unstable. This is not failure. This is defense. Why awareness feels uncomfortable. Awareness removes autopilot. And autopilot is efficient. It allows the mind to save energy, to repeat familiar loops, to avoid questioning old patterns. Awareness forces responsibility. And responsibility feels heavy, because once you see a pattern clearly, you can no longer pretend it isn't there. That is why many people stop halfway. They sense something deeper, but they turn back, not because they can't go further, but because going further changes things. The fear of inner silence. Most people believe silence is peaceful, but true inner silence can be terrifying, Because when the noise fades, there's nothing to distract you from what remains: unresolved emotions, buried memories, unspoken fears. The mind fills space with noise to avoid this confrontation, that constant thinking, that mental chatter. It's not intelligence. It's avoidance. How? Distraction becomes addiction. Look around. Silence has become rare. Stillness feels uncomfortable. The mind jumps from stimulus to stimulus to avoid staying present. Social media. Entertainment. Endless information. These are not just habits. They are coping mechanisms. They keep awareness shallow. Because depth requires courage. Asterisk. The subconscious prefers speed over truth. Fast reactions feel efficient. Slow observation feels risky. That is why emotions often arrive fully formed, without explanation. Anger feels justified instantly. Fear feels logical immediately. The subconscious decides first. Then it hands the decision to logic and asks it to defend the choice. And logic usually agrees, not because it's right, but because disagreement creates tension. Asterisk. Why you defend your own limitations. Here is something deeply unsettling. People often defend the very patterns that limit them. They say things like, "That's just how I am. I've always been this way. It's just my personality." But personality is often a collection of adapted defenses, formed early or reinforced often, rarely questioned, and defended fiercely. The ego's job is not truth. It is consistency. It protects your story about yourself, even when that story causes suffering, because changing the story requires admitting it was incomplete. And that feels like loss. So the ego resists. Quietly. Persistently. But something changes when awareness stays present. Slowly, very slowly, you begin to notice the gap between impulse and action. A fraction of a second where choice becomes possible. That gap is small. Fragile. But it is real. And it is where freedom begins. The observer is not the mind. Thoughts come and go. Emotions rise and fall. But the awareness watching them remains. It does not panic. It does not argue. It does not explain. It simply observes. That observer is not conditioned the same way thoughts are. It is not reactive. It is not afraid. And that is why it feels unfamiliar. Why this changes everything. Once you notice the observer, you cannot unnotice it. Even when you react automatically, a part of you knows the pattern, knows the trigger, knows the habit unfolding. And that knowing creates space. Space weakens control. End of segment 3. Deepening the hook. In the next segment, we'll explore something crucial. Why awareness alone does not dissolve patterns. Why the mind adapts to observation. And why real change requires something deeper than simply knowing better. Because the subconscious is intelligent, and it does not surrender easily. Why knowing is not enough. Most people believe awareness is the solution. That once you know your patterns, they will disappear. But knowing is only the beginning. The mind is not defeated by information. It adapts to it. You can understand your trauma, explain your habits, name your fears, and still repeat them, because insight alone does not rewrite conditioning. The subconscious does not respond to logic. It responds to experience. Think about how you learned fear. No one explained it to you. No one sat you down and taught you anxiety. It was felt, repeated, imprinted. The body learned before the mind could argue. That is why explaining a pattern does not dissolve it. The subconscious listens to emotion, to sensation, to repetition. Words are secondary. Why you fall back into old patterns. Have you ever noticed this? You promise yourself change. You feel motivated, clear, and then something small happens. A tone, a look, a memory. And suddenly you are back, reacting the same way, thinking the same thoughts, feeling the same emotions. This does not mean you failed. It means the old pattern is stronger than the new awareness. For now, the subconscious is patient. Your conscious mind gets tired. It loses focus. It becomes distracted. The subconscious does not. It waits. It knows you will eventually relax your attention. And when you do, it resumes control, not out of malice, out of habit. Asterisk. Why change feels like losing yourself. Here is a truth few people talk about. Real change feels like identity loss, because your identity was built around patterns. If those patterns dissolve, something feels missing. You don't recognize yourself. And the mind interprets that as danger. So it pulls you back to what feels like you. Even if you were suffering, the mind confuses familiar with safe. Familiar pain feels safer than unfamiliar peace. Because peace requires trust. And trust requires surrender. The subconscious does not surrender easily. It was built to protect, even if its protection is outdated. The emotional core of control, at the center of every strong pattern is an emotion that was never processed. Fear that was never felt fully. Anger that was never expressed. Sadness that was never allowed. So the mind built a workaround. Avoidance. Distraction. Control. These are not flaws. They are adaptations. Why people fear going deeper. Going deeper means feeling what was avoided. And feeling feels dangerous to a mind trained to survive. That is why people intellectualize. Analyze. Explain. Explanation feels safe. Feeling feels risky. The moment patterns begin to weaken, patterns do not dissolve when you fight them. They dissolve when you stay present with the emotion they are protecting you from. Not judging it. Not fixing it. Just allowing it. This is uncomfortable. This is slow. And this is why most people avoid it. A quiet shift, but when you do this, something subtle happens. The body realizes it can survive the feeling. The nervous system softens. The pattern loses its job. Not instantly. Not dramatically, but gradually. Why this feels like vulnerability. Letting go of control feels like exposure. Like standing without armor. But armor was never freedom. It was protection. And protection has a cost. Why control is an illusion. Why surrender is misunderstood. And why the mind resists letting go when it no longer needs to hold on. Because what feels like weakness is often the beginning of real strength. The illusion of control. Control feels powerful. It feels safe. It feels intelligent. But most control is not strength. It is fear, wearing a convincing mask. The mind learns early that unpredictability hurts. So it tightens its grip on routines, on expectations, on people, on outcomes. And the tighter it holds, the more tense everything becomes. Yet tension feels familiar, and familiarity feels safe. Why letting go feels dangerous. Letting go sounds peaceful in theory. But in reality, it feels like falling. Like removing your hands from the wheel while still moving at full speed. The subconscious panics at this idea. Because control helped you survive once. It does not know that the threat is gone. So it reacts as if danger is still present. The body carries the memory. Your body remembers what your mind tries to forget. A tight chest, a shallow breath, a clenched jaw. These are not random sensations. They are signals. The nervous system is holding onto unfinished experiences. Moments when you couldn't respond, couldn't escape, couldn't speak. So the body learned to stay ready. Always alert. Always prepared. Even when there is nothing to fight. Why rest feels uncomfortable. Have you noticed how hard it is to truly relax, even in silence? The mind searches for noise. Because stillness feels unfamiliar to a system trained for survival. Rest feels like vulnerability. And vulnerability feels unsafe to a mind shaped by fear. So it stays busy. Always thinking. Always planning. Always preparing. The addiction to mental noise. Thoughts become a distraction. Planning the future, replaying the past, imagining worst-case scenarios. This constant activity creates the illusion of control, but it also creates exhaustion. And exhaustion keeps awareness shallow. What the mind is afraid to feel under all this noise is something simple. Raw sensation, emotion without story, feeling without explanation. The mind fears this because it cannot control it. So it wraps emotion in narrative. I am like this because, it happened because, they made me feel. Stories feel safer than sensation. When the story drops, but when the story falls away, even briefly, what remains is direct experience. Tightness. Heat. Pressure. Movement. And when you stay with that, without escaping, something shifts. The sensation peaks. Then changes. Then fades. The body learns it can complete what was interrupted. Why this is rarely taught. We are taught to think, not to feel. To explain, not to experience. Because feeling requires presence, and presence cannot be rushed. It demands patience. And patience does not fit into a fast world. The subconscious begins to release when the body feels safe and auto-experience sensation. Fully, the subconscious loosens its grip, not because it was forced, but because it is no longer needed. Control dissolves when protection becomes unnecessary. A subtle kind of freedom. This freedom is quiet. No dramatic breakthrough. No instant transformation. Just a little more space. A little less tension. A pause where reaction used to be. And that pause changes everything. Asterisk, the part of the mind that fears surrender most. The part that believes control equals survival. Because once this belief loosens, the entire system begins to reorganize. The core. Fear beneath control. At the deepest level, control is not about power. It is about fear of helplessness. A fear so old you don't remember learning it. A fear that says, if I don't stay alert, something bad will happen. This belief did not come from nowhere. It was born in moments when you felt overwhelmed, unsupported, or unseen. Moments when you had no control, and it hurt. The mind never forgets powerlessness. Powerlessness leaves an imprint. The body remembers what it felt like to freeze. The breath remembers how shallow it became. The nervous system remembers how it learned to brace. And from that moment on, the subconscious made a promise: never again. That promise still runs your life. Why the mind overreacts. This is why small situations can feel overwhelming. A delayed message, a change in tone, a lack of response. Your reaction feels bigger than the situation. Because it is not about the present. It is about the past replaying itself through a new trigger. The mind does not see time clearly. It reacts to patterns, not dates. The child beneath the adult inside every adult is a younger nervous system. It learned rules before. Logic developed. Rules like, stay quiet, stay strong, don't need anyone, stay in control. These rules once protected you, but protection can become a prison when it is never updated.